Hello and welcome to the 13th edition of Table Talk. My name is Aaron Kornblit, and this is Table Talk, our Airtable's weekly live stream answering all of your questions about Airtable. So in this kind of new edition in 2022, we got a lot of questions around, how should I plan, or how do I set up my goals in Airtable or any software, frankly, in 2022. So we thought we'd do a special session to kick off the year, talking about how to plan and track your goals in Airtable. But before we get into that, I'd like to say hi to some folks, some recurring viewers, if you will. So Coolbone, Rebecca, welcome. If you're new here, please go ahead and say hi in the chat. Really, that's where you can ask me questions and interact and really get the most out of these sessions. So obviously I've got a little bit of a plan here, but you can influence, ask us questions, get most out of this session. Taylor, welcome. First Table Talk of the year. I have to say, it's only been 3 weeks since I've been here, or since we've been together, but I feel rusty. I feel like I haven't done this. I've forgotten all of the things I've learned over the last year. Welcome, Aaron. Welcome, Penny. Slimy, welcome. Thank you. I built this keyboard myself. Appreciate that compliment. Appreciate it. So we are gonna kind of today build out a base around your goals and your team's goals for the year that you can use. And since you're here joining me live, let me know in the chat, what are your team's goals? Do you have a revenue objective? Do you want to grow the team? Do you want to improve your colleagues' skills, their welfare? Talk to me a little bit about what you hope to accomplish for yourself, for your team, for your business in the chat. And I'm going to use those examples in the base that we built out today. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start from scratch. We're going to build out a kind of goal tracking base, something that goes into projects and deliverables. And we're going to build out a skeleton, talk about how to do that, and then fast forward 6 months into what that could look like once your whole team is working out of Airtable. How can you get as much value as you can? Now, there's a link in the chat with how to ask questions for this stream. So you feel free to fill that out throughout, and we have folks from the team curating those and adding them to the agenda. And second, make sure to fill out the swag link for your chance to win swag at the end of the session. Last note, before I jump in, I actually have 2 presents for you at the end of the stream. One is around swag, and one is for an upcoming session that you have all been asking for that I can't wait to announce what we're going to do in January. I'm going to keep that for the end. Let the pleasure last a little bit. But with that, let's jump in. Some new folks here. Melissa, welcome. Torrell, Veronique as well. Fellow Montrealer, if I'm not mistaken, or fellow Quebecer, welcome. Appreciate you joining. So our goal today, we're going to be creating a project or goal tracking base. So let's jump into it. And again, as I'm building this out, let me know in the chat what your goals are for you and your team. And I'm going to weave that into our example today. Okay, so we're here in our kind of agenda for today. And this is where we do all that confetti. If you're new here, you're going to learn about that in just a moment. So for kind of questions or outlines that we're going to talk about today, and feel free to add to them as I'm going through, and I'm going to make sure I answer all of your questions. So first, we're going to talk about what are your team's goals? How do you translate that into Airtable? Then how do you link your projects that you're working on and keep track of those so you can track those as well as the goals that relate to them? And then how do you track progress on your project and goals, right? So how do you go about linking all of that information together to see how you're progressing week over week? And then we're going to fast forward 6 months and say, hey, how did the fact that we're tracking, how do we go about and report on our goals, get our whole team into this goal and project tracking base, and work together to be able to accomplish those goals we set out at the beginning of the year. Hey, Kevin, welcome. Okay, so with that, let's kind of jump in. So now's a good time. Let me know your goals in the chat, and I can add to this agenda with your questions. So we're going to start off today with a kind of empty base here. So I'm here in goal tracking. And this is our empty base that we're going to start off working from today. So if you're like me, you probably have team New Year resolutions. And really, when you're starting from scratch, it can feel a little intimidating. And think about how do you input that information into your Airtable base so that every table should be its own separate type of information, right? So when I think about my information that I want to track this year, I probably have goals. Then I have projects that relate to those goals. And then I have deliverables, the things that make those projects become life related to projects, right? So each one of those is going to be its own table with tracking all the information around the goal and then all of the information around projects and then deliverables. So first, our first table here, we're going to start with goals. So that's going to be our first table. That's the first piece or type of information that we're going to go ahead and track. So I'm going to look to the chat here and keep adding different goals that I can kind of put in. So Veronique wants to automate every step of production. So I'm going to make this goal into produce more content, or you know, double our content production output, putting some marketing speak into that. Let's make this a little bit larger so we can all read that, right? So that is our first goal. I'm putting this under the name field, which is added to every single table. So let's go ahead and see if we have any other goals in the chat. Keep adding them and I'll update them. Let's say continuing down this kind of production output, let's say we want to diversify our production or our content channels. So maybe we want to have a YouTube live stream, add TikToks, whatever new channel is out there, we want to go ahead and add content onto those channels. And then maybe we want to say something like, produce 5 or produce more blog posts. So again, I'm just putting these out there. Feel free to drop some in the chat if your team has a different goal. So now we're tracking 3 different goals in our goals table. Now there's probably some information around each one of these goals that we want to track. Maybe something like which manager in our team is responsible for that goal. Is there a metric that we're going to track? So I have some ideas. I just mentioned some. So let me know in the chat if you have information or fields that you'd like to suggest to track for the goals. I'm going to start kind of thinking about here. So I'm going to delete the ones that come kind of basic in the table. Owner or manager responsible feels like a good field, right? So we have one person responsible to maybe report on each one of these goals. So I'll say owner, something like that. And owner is going to be a collaborator field. These are folks I've invited to this base that are going to be working with me. So every time you add someone to your base, they get added into this single select or not a single select, this dropdown, I should say, that you can pick that collaborator. So Ash, Bailey, Elza are all my team members that I've invited to the space. Let's say Ash is responsible for content production. And let's say Bailey is responsible for content channels. And then the ever so trusty Elza is going to be producing more blog posts. So there we now have an owner field. And then probably something around status feels right. Like, are we on track? Are we off? Are we succeeded that goal? That way we can kind of track how we're doing for those goals at a very high level. So I'm going to call this status. So I'm adding a field that we're going to track across all of our goals. And the field type, I want to pick one option among many that I'm creating. So this is going to be a single select. So I write that out, select single, and then I can create my own statuses that I want for these different goals. Usually you want something that's like off, in progress, good, So I'm going to go ahead and say the first one is below expectations, on track, and then success. So that way we have something that says, hey, we're not going to hit this goal. We're on track to hit it, and we have hit it. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Let's just assign one status to each one of our goals here. Okay, so this is coming along, right? So we've got our goals table. And then maybe the last thing is something like a metric, like a revenue metric we want to assign to each one of these goals. So here I'm going to pick a currency field. Now my metric is one of a dollar amount, but it might be a number for you. It might be a piece of text that you add every month. That's totally fine. Whatever goals are you want to track, you can create your own field, and that's really the beauty of working out of Airtable is you can define what information you want to track for each one of your goals. So we're going to say this is a currency field. There we go. There we go. So it's a 50,000. I don't know what a good number is. Is 500,000 better? I don't know. Depends how large our team is. There we go. That's good. Let's give this one a nice little million. And let's remove the zeros. It's always, there we go, like that. Change it, save. Okay, great. So now our goals have an owner, they have a status, and they have a revenue objective that we want to be able to hit for each one of those goals. And this is a great step, right? So if you're thinking of like, I want to set goals for the year, whether for yourself, your team, your company, the goals table like this is a great place to start. You have your goals somewhere. And now the question becomes, well, how do you track the things that relate to this goal? What rolls up to these objectives, projects, and then deliverables? So let's go back into our little agenda. What are your team's goals? Take a moment to think about them. How would you translate those into an Airtable base as I just did? And what elements you need to track around each one of those goals so you know its status and things like that. So with that, the most important moment of this stream, I wouldn't say of the year, but definitely of the month of January so far, we're gonna go ahead and drop our first confetti. Boom. All right, now we're officially back. Until you get that first confetti out of the way, you're not back to streaming, back to table talk. We're officially back. Cool. Okay. Now, woo. So this is the right moment. If you have a question around goals or whatever we're doing around Airtable, go ahead and drop it into that form. Also, go ahead and submit the swag form. We're going to draw Airtable swag at the end of the session. So go ahead and fill out that form as well. And with that, let's kind of continue along. Well, great. Now that we have our goals tracked somewhere, we have our goals table. The next step is to say, well, what are the elements that roll up to those goals? What are we going to do to accomplish these revenue objectives, these three goals? We're probably going to have some type of projects, right? So these are initiatives of the team that are going to move these metrics. And this is a different table because we're tracking different types of information. We might have multiple projects for the same goal, and there are different elements that we want to track. Therefore, it's a different type of information that we want to track. So we're going to create a new projects table. Now, similarly, we might say, well, okay, what are those different projects that we want to do, and what are the elements of information we need to track for each one of these projects? So let's imagine that we have 4 projects, right? And let's just start out by naming them. I'm just going to give it project 1, project 2, project 3, and project 4. And I'm not naming, I'm terrible at thinking of ideas of projects on the fly. So I'm going to spare you the humiliation of me trying to think of projects that relate to our goals. But we have 4 projects now. Now the next step is thinking, okay, what are the elements, again, that we want to track for each one of these projects? You know, and again, drop some in the chat. What comes to mind for me is something like, when are we going to start this project? When are we expecting to end this project? Who's the owner of this project? How much revenue has it brought according to the metric that we've set ourselves, right? And start thinking about, well, are there other, maybe something like an owner field, who's responsible for it, feels like the right fields to track for each one of our projects. The great one from Stephanie around deposits, document tracking. Those are great. Maybe you have documents for this project as well. Definitely go add that in. And Stephanie, I think you're on Facebook. If you join us on YouTube, you can see everyone else's chat So join us on youtube.com/Airtable app, and you'll definitely see everybody's chat. Cool. But it's great to know that folks are watching on Facebook as well. That's great. Cool. Okay, so let's start kind of implementing, adding those fields we want to track across each project. So again, I'm going to kind of delete these base fields, if you will. And then what did I say? I said I wanted something like a start date. So I'm going to name that field start date, and we're inputting dates. So I'm going to go ahead and search date. That is a field type. I'm going to create that. And let's imagine we're starting these next week. This one's starting the week after. We're all in on the New Year's. We're starting projects left and right. There we go. So I've just set the start date for each one of those projects. And then naturally, I want something like an end date. That's the expectation of when that project's gonna complete. So again, another date field. And let's say our projects usually last a couple of months here, so they're gonna end in March. Awesome. So I'm seeing some great suggestions in the chat that I'm gonna get to in just a moment. Awesome. What did I think I said? Owner. That feels like which team member is responsible for this project. So another collaborator field. And let's add, let me assign myself to one of these projects. You know, I need to have a little bit of work outside of table talks. So I'm assigning folks. Great. Let's give Geo one as well. Okay, great. And then one of the metrics I mentioned was revenue. So we don't have that number just yet. We can have a currency field. We're just starting out. Let's create that field and let's set them all to 0. So I'm just going to copy paste this, bring it down. Great. Now, Abid in the chat, in the Facebook chat mentioned, well, I'd like to know which goals relate to which projects. And I think that's a perfect point where your goals in and of themselves are great to have, to mark down. But what's important is that you're able to track the things you're doing to accomplish those goals. So it's important that you know which project relates to which goal. So whenever you say that in Airtable, I'd like to have this relate to that. I'd like to associate these pieces of information across tables. Well, that is a linked record. So we're going to use a linked record to say this project is associated to this goal. And we're going to do that using a linked record. So I'm going to create a special field type. I'm going to call this goal or associated goal. I'm going to link to another record. I'm going to link to the goals table. Now we're only going to allow one project to be associated to one goal. There we go. And this is a special field type because when I click plus here, I see my 3 projects from the other table. So if you're new to Airtable, this will feel, or I hope it'll open to your eyes, this ability to link information across your base to say this project is related to this goal. So let's say project 1 is for doubling our content production. Let me make this a little larger here. There we go. Project 2 is to diversify our content channels. Now I'm actually, before I continue associating, let's actually go back to goals, and you'll see that we have that inverse relationship. I see that goal 1, the double our content production output, is associated to project 1, which we've just associated. So I can do that here as well. If I can say produce more blog posts is associated to project 3, that relationship will follow through as well. And I could see produce more blog posts. So other examples that this might make sense. Maybe you want to associate contacts to a certain company or deals to a certain company as well, or to content, to projects, to channels. Really, the possibilities are endless. So let's associate project 4 to goal 1. And now we have 2 projects associated to goal 1 and 1 project associated to each goal. So this is the second step here. We're saying, great, we have our goals. Now we have our projects that we want to act on those goals with. And now we've associated those 2 to say this goal is related to this project and this project is related to this goal. Okay, so now that we have our goals table, we have our projects table, we're getting somewhere. Not that we weren't somewhere a moment ago, but we're feeling like this is something that we can work on start adding information into this to actually say, hey, we had these goals at the beginning of the year. And then 3-4 months later, here are where we are relative to those goals. Here are the projects. Here's how those projects went. Here's who's responsible. And really have that go from, hey, I have these goals that I abandoned 3 months in, to say, hey, we have these goals and here's how we're doing relative to those goals. Okay. Boom. Seeing some great questions. Stephanie, Candina, appreciate those. But we have now our projects and our goals in one place that we've associated. I feel like that's a good moment for some confetti. Amazing. Whoop. Okay, so next step here is, okay, we have our projects, we have our goals, but how do we track the actual things that we're doing for those projects, right? So what are the elements of things we need to deliver to progress into our different projects? So there's a question from Michael, how can we do tasks, right? And this is essentially where we're going. How do we have those work items that relate to our different projects? So some people will call these tasks, some people will call this deliverables, items, things like that. But what's important is that each one of these work items relates to a project, and we want to know what their status is or who's responsible and the due date. Again, this is something different that we're tracking. So we're going to go ahead and create a third table that I'm going to call deliverables. And here, again, I'm going to just call this deliverable 1, deliverable 2, deliverable 3. So for folks who use or maybe use the spreadsheets or other software or project management software, here we're not saying that these are tasks, or we're not telling you that tasks should be formatted in a certain way because everyone's work is different. So here you have control over the different elements of information you want to track and how you structure them, which adds more flexibility. So here I'm going to, again, delete this one, and we're going to go through this one pretty quickly because we've kind of done the structure a little bit. So imagine I want to say, what is the start date? Or what is the due date? I should say due date. Feels right for this specific deliverable. So I'm going to go ahead and just have a date field. Boom. And let's imagine that this is due on the 13th. We have deliverable 1, 21st, and then 26th. And then similarly, I'm going to have an owner field who's responsible for this one. Again, we're going to have a collaborator. And let's give most of these to Elsa. She's really good. And maybe one to me. You know, that's the value of being the base builder, is that you can kind of avoid assigning things to yourself, or pick the deliverables that you want to work on. Okay, great. And there's a question in the chat that I do want to cover. How can we associate, right? And associate a task or deliverable to its project. But that's exactly the same structure as associating a project to its goal. So we're going to go ahead and add a linked record that we're going to say project. Link to another record and go to projects. And let's imagine that 2 of these are associated to project 1. So I'm clicking plus, associating them to project 1. Then the second one I'm associating to project 2. And if I go over to projects, I see my deliverables associated to each project. So I can expand this and see, okay, project 1 has this deliverable owned by Elsa, due on the 13th. And deliverable 2, due on the 21st, also associated to deliverable 1. Now that we have our structure, right? So we have our goals that roll up into projects, that roll up into deliverables. We now can start thinking about, well, how do we go about tracking information into this base, right? Because the act of accomplishing goals is actually taking steps towards that goal on a weekly basis and tracking which steps we're taking, whether it's working, whether it's not working. So actually accomplishing our goals means tracking and inputting information into this base in a convenient and easy way. Now, before I do that, one thing that is very important in this base is status. Is this task or deliverable done? So I'm just gonna quickly add a checkbox field. Let's say Elsa has created or completed their first task. And now we have our base structure. So coming back to my point just a second ago around how do we go ahead and make it easy to track information or add information into this base so we can go ahead and track how we're doing. So I'm just going to propose here a few views. So views are set specified ways of looking at your information that you can look. And in this particular case, we're going to imagine that we want to kind of update the information with our team on a weekly basis to make it easy. So one way I could do is create a new view. So I'm going to create a calendar view. And we're going to say this weekly review. And the date I want to pick is due date. There we go. And now I see all of my deliverables for the month on this calendar. So this gives me that foresight, that ability to get everyone together and say, okay, how are we doing on deliverable 1? Do we still think the 13th is the right deadline? Do we think that we can hit deliverable 2 on the 21st? Now note that a moment ago, I created that done checkbox, right? So maybe we want to go in, and if I click in, I can expand the record and see all of that record's information. And I see that it's done. We can go into deliverable 2 and see and say, oh yeah, well, actually we finished this one 2 weeks ahead of time. I can update that information. And what's important when you're creating views, all views are working views. So you can update information in one, and it'll be updated across all of your views. Now, a few things you can do from here. You can filter out, say, tasks or deliverables that are done. So where done. So I'm adding a filter to this view is unchecked. So it's only keeping deliverables that aren't yet done. So that's one example. That's one thing we could do. Another thing we can do is actually just, if I delete that filter, is to color. So maybe I want to say where done is checked, turn that into a nice little pale green. And then otherwise, right, if that's not done, let's make this a yellow. So I'm keeping the context around the information that I need, all of my deliverables, but I'm adding a little bit of color so I can know which ones are done and which ones aren't. So that's one example of making it easy to work with your team to update information and make sure everything's up to date. Another example, maybe you want to create a grid view. So all deliverables, and you can group this by project, right? And go project by project and talk in your meeting about how things are going and see progress across your deliverables. Now, another one, let's go to projects. And maybe you want a higher level view of everything everyone is working on. So this view I'm going to call all projects. If I go into the view sidebar, we have a few different view types. I can create a timeline view. So it's a timeline of all projects. So it's saying I want the start date to be my start date and end date to be the end date. Great. Let's close this out. And if I zoom out, let's go to the quarter, I can see the progress of all of my projects. And if we start adding things like status and who's responsible, we can add that information into the labels or color them. So let's say I want to add the owner to the label and I have all of my projects. So views make it easy to visualize information, make it easy to add information in. And again, just with that goal of tracking your progress across each deliverable that rolls up into project, that rolls up into goals. So with that, that is the bare bones structure that I'm proposing to you as one example of what your goal tracking base could look like. But what I hope you kind of take away from this structure is that it's important to mark your goals, but then input all the things that go into your goals and track those across time. So you're able to say, hey, we had these goals and here's how we're progressing against those goals 2 weeks out, 1 month out, 2 months out, 3 months out. So you don't find yourself like in my situation where I set goals and then forget about them. 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later because I never inputted that system to track them. Great. Okay. So the next step here is actually, what does this look like 3-4 months from now? So before we get into that, let's get our confetti. We can congratulate ourselves on building this great base structure. Amazing. I'm not sure, Rebecca, if you're laughing at my hand movements. I don't know. I have this habit of warming my hands between each question. It's very cold here in the studio. But thanks for letting me know. I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum. Okay, so now that we've built our base, and I do see some great questions, keeping track of which material, tools, how far I am to completion. So I think I partially answered those. So I'll keep those to the end, right? So do continue adding questions. There are some great ones here. I do want to talk about what this looks like in a few months, and then we'll go through some questions that I'm seeing around goal project tracking information. Cool. Okay, so 6 months from now or 3 months from now, how do you go about what could this look like once you've had your team starting inputting information and really building out a base that has all of that information for you to say, we have been successful or unsuccessful, here's what we've learned, and truly create that system so you're able to accomplish your goals for this year. So we're going to go into this purple base. And in this purple base, you'll notice some differences. Now it has that same structure, team goals, projects, and deliverables, but it's purple. That's difference number one. And difference number two, there's this little globe. And that little globe is the emoji you get when you search for future in emojis. So when you see this little globe emoji, that's something we've added in the past couple of months. And my goal here is just to show you how a base can evolve into something that truly has all of your information in one place, but also kind of shares information across the company, across different teams, communicates information externally. It makes it easy to update information internally and truly create that tool you've always dreamed of having. So what we're going to do here is just go through these updates that we've done and kind of show you, explain why we've made those updates. So the first one I want to talk about is this company goals table. So in this company goals table, you'll notice that there's a little lightning bolt, and this is a synced table. So what happened with our base is that the team said, hey, this is a good base. Every team should have goals, right? And we should have company goals to say, how does your team goal relate to the company goal? So what our company decided to do in this example was create a company goals table with 4 goals for the whole company, and then let folks sync that information into their base. So expand nationally to all states is one goal for our company. Increase revenue by 25%. Diversify line of business sales. Improve employee welfare by 25%. These are the first quarter's goal for 2022. And we've been able to then associate our team goals into that general company goal. That way we know that what we're working on has a direct impact on the company's goal as well. And we're able to communicate that directly in our base. So someone coming here can say, oh, I understand why you picked those goals and those projects and those deliverables, because they roll up directly to our company goal. So using Airtable Sync, and we have a table talk specifically around Airtable Sync. If someone could drop that link in the chat, I'd be grateful. That talks about how to use Airtable Sync. Next change here, I want to talk about this revenue year to date. So there was a question in the chat, or I think in the agenda, where how do you roll up, how do you bring those project level revenue or objectives into your team goals? So if we go back to our projects table, we now have a revenue. So we see the amount of revenue that each one of these projects has brought in, and this is the metric that us as a team want to track, but you'll see that some of these projects are related to different goals. So these two, project 1 and project 3, are towards the same goal. So we want to be able to associate these two to say, hey, we've generated 17,000 in revenue around this double our content production. That project, that team goal is at 17,000 of revenue. So to roll up information, say we have project 1 and project 3 associated to this goal, what we use is a roll-up field. So here, and then we have a table talk around fields as well that I'll drop in the chat where we talk about the roll-up field. So this goes to projects, looks at revenue, and sums the revenue for every project associated to this goal. And that allows us to say, hey, we have 17,000 in revenue for project 1 and project 3 together. Maybe we want an average revenue or a max. You can do that using the roll-up field. And we have that across all of our goals. So there we go. So we're starting to think about how do we track the metrics? How do we bring those metrics to the project level? Continuing along this table here, a few more fields that I want to show you briefly. One person mentioned, well, what if our metrics are not, a number? What if we want to add commentary? Well, you can have these fields, these text fields, check in. So this is an example actually that I pulled from a goal tracking base that we have at Airtable, where the person responsible, notes at the end of the month, what are the updates to that specific goal, saying how they're doing, and you could see progress across each month for a separate field. You can also have just one field with separate blocks of text for each monthly update. So really it's up to you to think about how do you structure your base in a way that maps to the way you track information and how you want to see updates across time. Okay, so that is the updates to team goals. And what I hope you take away from this is not, I need to structure my base like Aaron's, but more of these bases organically grow and adapt to the way that your goals expand or the things you learn and information like that. Okay, continuing on to projects here. Do you want to show an example of other views that you can create? You can create a Kanban view, which this one's a little broken because we have a lot of folks that were invited, and see assigned projects that are assigned across different team members and adapt ownership. So you say, maybe we want to give this to Elza because I have too much work and things like that. You can have that timeline view, which we built already, but gave it a nice color and a nice status. Again, just seeing that information at a high level and our projects. So that is the updates for the projects table. Where we'll see a lot more updates is to the deliverables. So now you notice that we have many more deliverables because folks have started adding all of the steps that they need for their particular project. I remember in the chat, there was a question around subtasks. Hopefully I answered that. Let me know if my kind of explanation of linked records was clear, Michael. And here, as you have more and more records, it becomes more and more important to create custom views for each collaborator or each stakeholder, different type of stakeholder in your projects. So you see that the team has created many more views. We have that weekly deliverables review, which we built together. But then there are also deliverables by project. So every single project across, every single deliverable across every project. You can look at by owner. So who's responsible for each deliverable and kind of get a sense of workload. So clearly, as always, Elza has much more on her plate than all other team members. So Annie, this is an example of workload where you say, well, does it make sense that Elza has all the videos and the campaigns and tracking metrics? Maybe we want to give this to someone who has a little less work. Let's give it to myself, and I can update that deliverable to myself, and I can click, and I can see that that information now has been updated. So it doesn't matter what view you update information in, it spreads, or that update is reflected across all views. And I could say that I'm now on my success metrics. Elza is definitely an overachiever. And frankly, I don't trust myself with this one, so let's give it back to Elsa. Elsa is our MVP here on the team, and definitely should have this larger workload. And I am only responsible for building bases. And so another thing is, as you build out more and more views, you can group them into sections, right? So I have all team views, the video team, where we filtered all projects associated to the video team, and kind of have different views for the whole team. So if you're kind of thinking about, well, how does this go long term? How do I collaborate in Airtable? We do have a table talk all around collaboration that talks about how to think about views, the different view permissions you can put in, how do you lock views and things like that. How do you make onboarding easy as you go from, hey, we have goals, we have projects, we have deliverables. Hey, we have like 20 people on this base. How do we make it easy to work in for everyone? So do have a session around collaboration. Okay, so those are the changes we've made in the base. We've added more fields, we've added more views, we've added synced views, and truly creating this single source of truth for our team to track our deliverables, our projects, our team goals that has evolved over the last couple of months. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is we've created interfaces. So far I've been talking to you about how folks have been working within the base. Now I want to talk to you about how are we communicating to stakeholders across the company, how we're doing across each goal and across each project. So in Airtable, you can create interfaces which are live on top of your information, but don't necessarily show all of the information in your underlying base. So let's imagine that we want to go into goal progress. Now this is a group of interfaces that have two interfaces. One is called goal review. This lets us communicate to managers and VPs how we're doing across goals that we've assigned to ourselves, and just gives them the information they need to review that specific goal that they're interested in without necessarily showing them deliverables or company goals or all that extra information in the base. Really an interface that is curated, that has the information they need. And then another one called project review. So let me go through those two, and then I'll jump to the questions in the Q&A. Okay, great. So here an interface was built by the team. So I can at the top pick which goal I want this dashboard to focus on. So let's go imagine diversify product channels. I can see all of that goal level information. Now we're missing a field here. Let me go ahead and delete this field. That's probably something I did. There we go. Let's go back into our interface here. Don't tell anyone I did that. And so now we have all of the information about this goal. Its status, that we are below expectation, that Ash is the owner, and that the video team is responsible. We see the description, that one we put together a moment ago. And we have our updates. So we see that our objective is 90,000 of revenue, and we only have 17,000 of revenue related to the projects that relate to this goal. We have our two check-ins, right? So that's the information from our fields into this interface. And this is perfect for an executive just kind of looking and saying, oh, well, we wanted to double our content. Looks like we're not in progress. And you can even comment, can we have a meeting about this goal and see how we can improve it? And that's added to the comments in the underlying record. So interfaces are perfect for folks in your workflow. Don't necessarily need access to all the information and just need to consume some of it in a way that's convenient to them. They want to dig deeper. They can see the two projects that relate to this goal and see even the deliverables that we're trying to deliver on that specific goal. So that's one example. And they could cycle through all the different goals that we've set ourselves for a team and get an update using Airtable interfaces. Now, I promise I'm going to say this one last time. We do have a table talk around interfaces as well. If someone wants to drop it in the chat, I'd appreciate it, but don't feel obligated to. I feel like I'm making you work hard. Okay, so that was our first kind of interface that we felt we needed to build because folks wanted updates on our goals. The second is for ourselves. Can we create a project review interface where we look at all the different projects that we're working on and just have this weekly cadence that we can go through and look at progress against our goals? Now, this is a different type of interface where we pick which project we want to look at on the left instead of in the drop-down. Yeah, there we go. So I can go and see, let's say, how is project 2 doing? See, I'm the owner on this project. Start date, end date, revenue, we're about 149,000 off our goal. And then I could see which goal it's related to, and I can even see a timeline. Let's go by year here. We're in 2022. I can see the different projects on a timeline that relate to this goal and the deliverables that are related to this specific project. So again, just putting that information in a way that's convenient for folks that either need to update the information or work on the information, accessible in an interface. So we started 3-4 months ago with this simple idea of, hey, let's put our goals into an Airtable base, start tracking the projects that relate to them, start tracking the deliverables to that. And now we have this interface for executives. We have an interface internally to make it easy to update and view our different projects, and truly built out this single source of truth. And last thing I will leave you on here before we get into questions is, I hope you take away from this, not necessarily my base structure, but what's important is that you create a base that maps to the way you work and to your goals and to the way you're gonna track your information. Start small, build upon it, bring people in, and then can build things like more custom views, interfaces to truly have that single source of truth. And my wish to you in 2022 is to have that, whether in Airtable or elsewhere, and have one place to work out of. Okay, with that, let's confetti and then drop into questions from the crowd. Okay, so how much time do we have here? We have 10 minutes and I have 4 questions, and I do want to leave time for swag. So I'm going to put the timer on here, and we're going to try to do this 1 minute at a time. So the question is, what if our team goals don't have the same type of measure success? Some are currency-based, other text-based. Okay, so putting the timer on, great question, Stephanie, appreciate it. Really up to you, right? So one thing you could do here is you can have one revenue-based objectives, and you can just create a view for goals that have revenue objectives, and then another view for your different objective types. Now you'll notice that sometimes it's difficult to track or to explain everything that's going on. Let me go back to the base here with metrics. So one example is just have a text field that talks about how you're doing according to those goals, and you can track updates according to that. So one tip is to create different views based on the type of metric. So if you have 3 projects that relate to revenue, make a view for revenue-based projects, and then another view for those different types of metrics, and you could track them one next to the other. You can create an interface with all of those in one place, really up to you. Or you can use text as well. So hopefully that helps. Right on time. Great. Next question here. Question from Kadina. I'm a creative person, have multiple projects going on at once. I feel you. The problem I have is keeping track of which materials, tools, and how far along I am to completion. What is a good way to use Airtable as a tool to make my life easier? Well, that's a whole different table talk. So let me reset my timer here. I'm gonna try to do this in a minute. Oh, we forgot the confetti. Let's do the confetti. Okay, Kadina, I'm resetting your timer here. There we go. Okay. Again, this is one of those things that you build out as you go along. Give yourself some goals and then maybe you want to go ahead and say, my projects roll up to those goals, but I use a different tool for each one of the projects. So go ahead and create a single select for the tool that you're using. And then you mentioned something around tracking progress. Well, this little check mark lets you track how far along you are for each deliverable in your project. So you see here I'm at 100%, here I'm at 0%. You can also create a roll-up field of the percent complete. So if you're interested in that, check out the community. There's probably a bunch of answers from Kuovone around how to create percent complete for the deliverables in your projects. But my main recommendation for you, Kadina, is to start small. Start building out your system as you go along, and then do things like add time tracking, documentation, documents, all that. Build it out as you go along. Don't try to tackle your base structure all at once, and build that perfect tool over time. Hopefully that answered the question. Whoop. Okay, 2 more here, and then we're gonna have 2 prizes. Let me just drop here. Okay, so I synced my calendar view with my Outlook. How often will it refresh? So this is actually, I think, on Outlook side. So I'm not sure that there is a specific cadence at which it will refresh. So I do think there's an article on support talking about what the refresh rate is, but I think it's actually variable and it's actually up to Outlook to refresh and not on us. So that is the unfortunate answer I have for you. I'm sorry, Mona, I wish I had a better answer. Okay, last question before we jump. So now is a good time. Go ahead and fill out the swag form if you want the chance to win some Airtable swag. And I have a second present for you all at the end of this one, so stick with us. Okay, can you view someone's workload or do time tracking? Absolutely. So let's imagine that you want to view someone's workload. So one way you can do that is with a Kanban view. So you can see the work items associated with any owner or collaborator with a Kanban view organized by the owner field, by the collaborator field. Also point your attention to the Matrix app. We haven't talked about apps, but that's another one where you can see across 2 dimensions. And you mentioned time tracking. So you can very easily have a time field, which is either a duration field that says how much time each one of these tasks took. So let's say this one was 6 minutes. So let's say it's 45:00 for 45 minutes. And you could roll up this information at the project level to see how much time folks are spending across each project. And that way you can do time tracking. You can also do that per owner and things like that. So hopefully that was a brief answer to how to see someone's workload or time tracking. Whew. Okay. All right. We got 3 minutes here. Okay. So if you haven't filled out the swag, I'm going to drag my feet here for just a moment and give you the time just to submit that form. Go ahead. We're going to run this script that, again, I wrote. So there's about a 75% chance that it works, 25% chance that it doesn't. I'm pretty confident. So let's go into, let's remove the timer here. Boom. Okay. How are we feeling? How are we feeling about this script today? Let's see. Let's see how this goes. It may be a new year. Maybe I didn't fix it. It's like the year 2000 all over again. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Max Goal is our swag winner for this table talk. So congratulations to Max. You should already have an email in your inbox showing you how to claim your Airtable swag for this week. Okay, congrats, Max. We have a minute here. My present to you all and to folks, we got over 100 questions, if not way over that last year around, can you give us more information around Airtable's roadmap? So I am extremely excited to announce that 2 weeks from today, on January 20th, we are going to have none other than Peter Dang, Airtable's Chief Product Officer, coming on to Airtable onto Table Talk to talk about Airtable's roadmap. So I'm going to be in an interview with Peter answering your questions around our roadmap. I couldn't be more excited to answer your question and to have Peter on to talk about Airtable's roadmap. So that is January 20th, 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on Airtable's YouTube channel. I am so excited to welcome Peter and to see you all in 2 weeks with Peter. Whew. So that was how to track your goals in Airtable, our first table talk of the year. Really, really excited to have you all back. And so here's me wishing you all a great year and couldn't be more excited to continue these table talks into the new year. Appreciate you joining and hope to see you back here 2 weeks from now with Peter talking about Airtable's roadmap. So with that, I'll see you off. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and see you soon. Bye, everyone.